We're talking about the arava, the humble arava, the willow, that gets to be center stage on the holiday of Hoshana Rabbah. And last time we spoke about the idea that we know the arava is exactly that. It's humble, it's got the least to offer. Doesn't have a smell, doesn't have a taste, so that represents the lack of either knowledge of Torah or observance of mitzvahs. And then we said, but the previous Rebbe says that the simplicity of that arava represents the simple Jew, and the simple Jew lives with simple faith, which is a very powerful concept. So we're going to drill down a little bit more into this arava and discover that although outwardly it appears to be so superficial and in a sense so empty, the arava is in many respects incredibly powerful. So to get to that, let's go back a step. Besides the theme that we've already identified, which is the smell and the taste and the four species, there's another theme that runs through all of the four species. Anybody know what theme is common to all of the four species? And that, of course, teaches us something about the nature of the holiday. Anybody know? There's growth, okay, unity. That's a good point. Unity. Unity is the theme that runs through all of the four species. So let's identify how. Start with a lulav. Where's the symbol of unity in a lulav? The leaves all have to be together. Remember, if it starts to open up, it's potentially not kosher anymore. Certainly if it opens beyond a certain point, it's no longer kosher, because it has to be that everything is seen as one. So there's your theme of unity. Where do you see the theme of unity? In the hadassim, the myrtles. That every node has to have three leaves. And ideally the way that it's supposed to grow is that the leaves are supposed to overlap. That's the ideal kind of hadassim. So you look at the hadassim again, typically the leaves overlap. So it's got this sense of cluster, the sense that everything is united. Where do you see unity in an esrog? It's a little bit more tricky. Where do you see unity in an esrog? Theme of unity.
Maybe all the segments inside the esrog.
Okay, but you don't see that. I mean, that's valid, but you don't see that. That what?
No impurities that the
okay, but how's that unity? So you hold it with the others. That's true. That's where you see the
and all together.
No.
Right?
So the answer. Thank you. The answer is that an esrog, unlike other fruits, lives through all of the seasons. So it's a fruit that unites the whole passage of time through the year. As opposed to other fruits that, they have their season and they ripen, and if you don't pick them when they're ripe, they'll be overripe, they'll fall off the tree. So there's a different kind of a unity. It's a unity that's expressed in unifying time. And where do you see unity in the willows? The aravas? They grow in clumps. Right?
It's like they hang down.
So we don't use the hanging. The weeping willow is not kosher for a lulav. So it's a different kind of a willow that actually dafka has to grow upwards, but they grow in clusters. So you see this in the weeping willow. It's like clusters of twigs that all come together. So if you have a look at a regular, well, I should say a kosher willow, you'll see the same kind of concept. So they all represent the idea of unity. Now, here's where things get profound. When it comes to unity, there are two fundamentally different ways that unity could be achieved. The one way that unity could be achieved, which might be the most common way that we achieve unity, is you bring different things together. So let's say, for example, a minyan. Would you call a minyan an experience of unity? Yes. But we all know how minyans work. There are a whole lot of different people doing their own thing with their own thoughts. Yes, of course, everybody's officially davening. But this person's davening a little faster, and that person's a little slower, and this person is chatting to the neighbor, and that person's checking their phone. So what unifies us is the thing that we're doing. It doesn't necessarily express true unity. In other words, there could be somebody who's making up the minyan who you don't even talk to. Could happen. Still a valid minyan. So it's a unity of parts. And anytime there's a unity of parts, there is some weakness to that unity. What's the weakness? You can take those parts apart. So that's using it. There's a few different examples that we could look
Yeah,
at.
but it's not a minion unless it's together, and that's maybe what you're trying to say about the lulav.
Right, exactly.
One
They
thing
start
is
to
missing.
spread. Exactly. So one person walks out, there's 10 people in the room, one person walks out, suddenly we can't say Kaddish. So it's like the lulav, right? You've got all the pieces, they have to be together. If they start spreading apart, it's no longer unity, it's no longer a lulav. Right? So in the same way, you get, so this is what we call a unity of parts. So in the same way, you could, for example, have a piece of machinery. And the piece of machinery has various parts to it. And then, based on those parts, the machine works. What happens if one part of the machine is no longer working? You remove that part, you replace it with another part, and now you've got the working machine again. So that tells you it's not a fundamental unity, it's a unity that is made up of putting things together. That's one kind of unity, the most common kind of unity. Another way that we express this is we talk about ink on paper. So once you have the ink on the paper, obviously it looks as if it's unity. But you could use a chemical agent, you could remove the ink from the paper, and now they're no longer united. So even though they look like they are so much part of each other, there's a method that you could use to separate them. That's one kind of unity. Then there is a far more profound experience of unity, which is what we call an essential unity, meaning to say it's a unity in essence. Now go back to those people in the minyan. As members of the minyan, the unity that we have is that we all came together. So you take 10 different people, you put them into a space, you create a minyan. True, valid. That is a unity of parts. Then there's a degree of unity between all of those people that's not about the minyan. It's about the fact that we're all Yidden. And therefore we are united at our core, whether we like it or not, and I can prove it to you. Very simply. You turn on your phone after Yom Kippur, and you see that there is a horrific terrorist attack in Manchester. And it's personal. You don't know the people, you don't know the shul, you never heard of the place, and it's automatically personal. Why? Because there's another layer of unity that is so deep, that's not comprised of things that we do together, even things that we celebrate together. It's not a unity of participation. It's a unity at a subatomic level. It's a unity at the core of our being. So, needless to say, which is the more profound unity? Obviously the one that's at your core. The one that's inescapable. The one that doesn't matter who you are, what you think, where you just feel that sense of connection. Why do you feel a sense of connection? Because we are fundamentally connected. Anybody else reads that news story, they might be from the same part of the world. They might hold the same citizenship, they might belong to the same municipality, whatever, but they don't feel the personal hurt of that event. Could have been their neighbor. Doesn't feel the same. So now when you look at the various elements that make up the four species that are supposed to represent unity, you've got to ask yourself the question, is the unity, or I'm going to say it slightly differently, is the value of each of those components unity, or is the value unity and something else? In other words, you look at let's start with the esrog, because esrog, of course, is the premium element of the four species. You look at the esrog. What is the value of an esrog? Based on everything that we've discussed so far. What makes an esrog special? So on the one hand, the esrog represents unity because the esrog goes through all the experiences of the year and kind of unites the seasons into a single experience of growth. But we also know that the esrog has a beautiful smell. So let's be honest. When you come on Sukkot morning, you take your esrog out of the box. What's the first thing that strikes you? The smell, or the fact that it was on the tree the whole year? You don't even think about the fact that it was on the tree the whole year, because the smell is so beautiful, you can't even help yourself. You want to smell your esrog. And then, you also are aware of the fact that it tastes. Most people don't even know that it's been on the tree all year. Well, that it could have been on the tree all year. Most people don't know that information. So what stands out for the esrog? Its qualities. Look how beautiful it is. People spend a lot of time examining the esrog, that it should have no blemishes. How yellow is it this? How hair. That's what stands out about the esrog, is the appearance, the smell, potentially the taste. The fact that it represents unity, I've got to learn that. It's not immediately apparent. Likewise, I come to my hadassim. What's the first thing that strikes me about the hadassim? Smell. Because they do have a beautiful smell, at least if they're kept moist. Okay, if they dry out, they're not going to have a smell. But if it's a nice, moist set of hadassim, I'm going to experience the smell. This is beautiful. Oh, and also, pay attention. You'll see there's 3 leaves in every node. Oh, that's a symbol of unity. But it doesn't strike me immediately. When I have a look at the lulav, so the first thing that strikes me about the lulav is, or maybe it's not the first thing, but I need to be aware of the fact that a lulav is not just from the palm tree down the road. It's got to be from a date palm. Why? Because it has to have that element of taste. Even though the lulav itself doesn't taste, it's got to come from a date palm that has a taste. So even though I can see immediately the element of unity, because I can see that my lulav is only kosher when it's all together, but I also know that it's also got this other element to it, which is the element of the taste, which represents knowledge. When I look at the arovas, there's nothing to distract me. I'm not getting caught up. Oh, look at this. Have you seen my arovas? Nobody walks into shul. Did you see my arovas? Whoa, where do you get such arovas? Right? You worry about them, that's for sure. Exactly, they wilt, especially for us in this climate, right?
Did you ask like 5
So-
days later, have you seen my robe?
Yeah, exactly, because I can't see them. I can't see them. But nobody's bragging, The guys coming to shul, everybody's oohing and ahhing over the esrog. Nobody's oohing and ahhing over your arovas. Maybe a week later, they say, oh, you still got leaves. How did you do that? Right? So what's apparent about the arovas? Not the smell, not the taste. So what's the only thing that arova has to offer? It's a symbol of unity. That illustrates that as much as the arava is the overlooked part of the 4 species, as much as the arava is the humble part of the 4 species, as much as the arava has the least to offer of the 4 species, that is its superpower. Because that tells you that the arava is not a sum of parts. Because an esrog is. It's the smell, plus the taste, plus the appearance, and also a symbol of unity. And the hadassim and arovas are a composite of smell or taste and unity. The arova only has one thing to illustrate: unity. The definition of an arova is a branch that grows in clusters. Arvei nochal. Arvei means, it's actually what the name of the arova means. Arova means to be engaged with each other, to be kind of enmeshed with each other. So there you learn something incredibly profound. That very often, when people or situations have something of value to offer, it distracts us from the core of what it is. In simple terms, let's say that you've got somebody who is an incredibly wise person. You don't know them. The only time you ever interact with them is they let you go ahead of them in the line at the checkout at a shop. So now you think you know them. Oh, I met so-and-so, such a kind person. I've completely missed who they really are. And that's what happens. When somebody has an obvious element to them, it distracts us from the core of who they are. So when I look at an esrog, I don't see unity, I see beauty. When I look at a lulav, I don't see unity, I see the stature of the lulav and the inflexibility, which is a positive inflexibility, like it stands strong. And I see that it's got a taste. When I look at the arava, I can't be distracted by anything else. I only see the essence. That's what the previous Rebbe is saying. Saying you have to understand that when we talk about the idea that the esrog has the smell and the taste, which represents study and mitzvahs, and the lulav only has smell that only has taste, the study, and the hadassim only have smell, the mitzvahs. It doesn't mean that these are things that the person, for example, is not doing the other. What do you think? A person who's a Torah scholar represented by the lulav doesn't do mitzvahs. It means that when I look at that person, I see so much of what they've done, of how much they've achieved, that I don't see the essence of who they are. When the arava walks through the door, that's a simple Jew. There's nothing to distract me from the fact that what makes this person special? His neshama. Because I'm not so busy looking at his abilities. I see his neshama. So that's the value of the Arava, the simple Jew that is so often overlooked in society, that actually has something to offer society nobody else has. What's that? A direct route to the core. A direct route to the essence.
Moshe Rabbeinu was like that.
Moshe had the advantage of all of the greatness, not allowing him to lose his simplicity. But he had the greatness, right? Right. Exactly. Exactly. So now we can understand something very intriguing about the Arava. Because one of the questions we asked right at the beginning is, how come it is that they created a whole schedule in the calendar to ensure that Hoshana Rabbah will never fall on a Shabbos? We weren't so worried about Rosh Hashanah or the first day of Sukkot, because if the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Shabbos, no shofar, which is a biblical commandment. And if the first day of Sukkot is on Shabbos, no lulav, which is a biblical commandment. And yet, Hoshana Rabbah, where you're supposed to do this concept with the Arava, which is only a custom, it's not written in the Torah. For that, they shifted the whole calendar to make sure it doesn't get overlooked. It doesn't make sense, right? Actually, it makes sense once you appreciate what the Arava represents, and by extension, this is a beautiful insight, what a custom is. Because in the same way as people overlook the Arava because it's not so fancy, we also tend to overlook customs. It's just a custom. Very often, if I had, what do they say? If I had $1 for every time somebody said to me, Rabbi, it's just a custom, it's not that important. Why? Because if something's mandated by the Torah, we think, okay, this you've got to take seriously. Hashem himself wrote it in his Torah, told us that you have to do it. It's obviously important. But custom, no. If I skip the custom, it's not so serious. So now look what happens. The sages come along and they say, we're going to engineer the entire calendar in such a way that you'll never miss this custom, even if it means that you miss the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Why? So you ready for this? This is incredibly powerful. I'm going to use an example just to illustrate. Please do not take offense to the example. So a wife says to her husband, you never buy me flowers. Right? So he says, okay, fine. Comes home the next day and he buys her flowers. What's the response?
What did you do wrong?
No.
Why you buy me flowers?
You're only buying flowers because I told you. I want you to buy flowers because you want to buy flowers. Right? So you're snookered. So when you blow a shofar on Rosh Hashanah, let's be honest, why do you blow a shofar on Rosh Hashanah? Because you want to? Because you want to? Or because you were told to? You were told to. Why do you shake a lulav on Sukkot? Because you were told to. Why do you take the Arava back in the Beis Hamikdash and walk around the altar? Nobody told you. Nobody told you. It's not written in the Torah. It's not even hinted at in the Torah. Who came up with this thing? We did. Because we want to do something for Hashem. A minhag, a custom, is an illustration of how at our essence, at our core, we want to do something for Hashem, even if we don't have to do it. That's what a minhag is. We, the people, came up with something that we could contribute to Hashem of our own love, rather than just out of instruction. Like the Arava. The Arava is not special because of anything fancy. The Arava is special because in essence it's special. Because in essence it represents unity. In the same way, a mitzvah is, one sec, in the same way, a mitzvah is very special, obviously, but it's Hashem's special. A minhag tells me that I am intrinsically connected to Hashem. That's why I want to do these things, that I don't have to do.
Is it not treading a thin line? Because you saw Aaron's sons wanting to do something for Hashem, and they got punished for it.
It's a great question. So you've got Aaron's sons who wanted to do something for Hashem, and it was out of line. And as a result, they were killed. So how do you know if what you're doing is aligned or misaligned? So that's why it's called a minhag. A minhag is not something that you invent just like that.
But
A
was
minhag
started by
had
somebody.
to, exactly, a minhag had to start with somebody. And more importantly, a minhag had to be adopted by the majority. Because there were many things over the years that people proposed that never stuck. They never became a minhag. And if the majority are not willing to participate in the idea that you have, it's probably not the right idea. So Aaron's sons, just the two of them going off on their little tangent, is clearly misaligned. But a minhag is something that's become part of mainstream society. So what's the ultimate example? Listen to this. It's a great way to illustrate this. Over the holiday that's coming, there are three primary focuses that we have. When I say three, one of them was mainly in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, but we still commemorate it today. You have the lulav and the sukkah. That's one category. Those are mitzvahs mandated by the Torah. And there are mitzvahs that are associated with simcha, right? V'samachta v'chagecha. It's specifically about sukkahs. That's a time of joy. But there's also something that they did in the Beis Hamikdash, which was called nisuch hamayim. All year round, when they brought sacrifices, they had to pour some wine down a special funnel on the side of the mizbeach. On sukkahs, they had to also pour water down a second funnel. And drawing that water, which took place on the eve of the second day of sukkahs, that was accompanied by the greater simcha, to the extent that the Gemara says if you had never witnessed that simcha, you'd never seen simcha in your life. So we commemorate that today by having a lot of simcha during the holiday of Sukkot. And we still call it, still today, we call it Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the simcha of the house of drawing the water, even though we're not drawing water. Where did this thing come from, Nisuch HaMayim? It's alluded to in the Torah. In the description of the sacrifices that they had to bring over Sukkot, there are extra letters that form the word Mayim. So from there we learn that there's a hint. So it's not mandated by the Torah, but it's hinted at in the Torah. What's the apex of Simcha during that period? Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is not written anywhere in the Torah. It's not even hinted at in the Torah. Who invented Simchas Torah? We did. It's a minhag. And yet it generates greater simcha than those aspects of sukkahs that are associated with what the Torah told us. Same principle. Why? Because when my simcha is a response to something that I'm told to do, obviously there's a limit on how much simcha I can generate because I'm required to be besimcha. But when my simcha is because I want to participate, because I want to create an opportunity, in other words, the simcha comes from the core of my being, that's a simcha without limits. In the same way as unity that is not a unity because you've got something to add, because you've got value, because you're an esrog, because you're a little, it's just unity because it's unity is the deepest form of unity. In the same way as the deepest connection that we have with Hashem is not a connection that comes from the things that we learn or the connection that comes from the things that we do, but the connection that comes from the core of who we are. And that is the message of the Arava. So this so-called unattractive Arava that really doesn't get a lot of airtime holds the secret to expressing what the deepest form of unity, of connection, and of simcha is all about.